Bonjour. My name is Jade. I am a Hello, bonjour. My name is Jade. I'm a registered nurse in the Mid-Des-Moines Health Clinic. Welcoming back everyone that has joined before for the monthly Indigenous Women's Health Talks, and sending warm welcomes to everyone who is new here like myself. Today's topic is walking the path to support healthy communities, looking at the prevention of diabetic complications. World Diabetic Day is November 14th, so this week. I am here with the wonderful and intelligent Dr. Alexa Lesperance. We are very lucky to have her here today, so miigwech, Dr. Alexa. Just a couple housekeeping items for everyone. In order to create a safe learning environment for all of us, you will not be able to turn on your microphone or camera for other viewers to see. You can use the chat option to ask any questions, or if you have any comments, on our Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitch. So those are the options to ask any questions or comment. Only our moderators will be able to see them, and they'll be passed along for Dr. Alexa to answer. At the halfway mark, we will have a break, and then at the end, there will be a survey to fill out for a chance to win a prize. So, Dr. Alexa.
Okay, so bonjour everyone. Good. I was about to say good morning. It is not. It is good afternoon. So just to get started in a good way, I'm just going to be opening us up with some medicines, and a song for you, and just a prayer. Just because we're all gathered here virtually, wherever you are on Turtle Island, we're happy that you're here joining us. So what I'm burning is sage, that I harvested earlier this year, and a little bit of cedar that I've ground up and then placed on the side. I'm going to say Chimiwich to Chimanado, creator, Chimiwich to all the four directions, our grandmother moon, our Giza's sun. Want to thank Creator for bringing us all together, for the water that is currently being polluted, and that the water that we're fighting for, the waters that are in our body, and the waters that are on our land. Want to just send lots of healing and love to anyone that's struggling. As Jade mentioned, this talk today is about diabetes, which in and of itself can be stressful and is really difficult, just because a lot of the reasons why our communities have diabetes are a direct result of colonization. So it can be a heavy topic for sure, but we're going to go through a lot of stuff today. Hopefully we'll learn stuff. Please feel free to ask questions. I am presenting to you in a didactic sort of way, but our hope is that you feel comfortable asking questions, and I'll try and get to them as we're presenting. So I think as we're letting this sage continue to burn, what we'll do is we'll open with a song. I myself, so as you may notice, Kate, who previously was our nurse, who was doing all of the introductions, would usually start us off, or one of our cultural leads. I myself really, in terms of singing, I'm not that great, but a good lesson that I learned was that when you are singing and when you're drumming, it's actually not about how good your voice sounds. The egotistical me was like, but I don't sound good. I don't want to do it. And then I was very quickly corrected by an elder. Well, you don't need to sound good. It's not for you. So I've since learned it's okay to be new at things and to sing songs and to not know all the words. This is really just how we learn. So I'm just going to sing a song for you. The song is called Strong Woman Song. And essentially, for those that don't know or haven't heard it before, one, we have an Onwa drum book. So if you're wanting to be able to actually hear the song, learn how to drum this song, we do have it on our website. But essentially, the song was, there was this elder, her name was Maggie, and so she, outside the Kingston Penitentiary, there's a really big women's women's prison. And so one of them was feeling particularly suicidal. And so the smoke that's burning is also for those that are incarcerated. And so she was noticing, so there was one woman that was really suicidal in that penitentiary. And so she sang this song outside over and over and over again until she could, until that person could hear, to try and lift that person's spirit and help them feel good and lift their hearts. And so she didn't know what to do, right? When people are in prison, and you can't really visit them, what can you do? So she stood outside all day drumming over and over and over the lyrics. And so I do think it's very powerful, very, very powerful song. I'm gonna stand. Just that. Good. We're still good. We shall get started. Okay. So the slides, pulling them up. holistic and traditional approaches to diabetes. So for those that don't know, I myself am a family physician. I've been in practice for about 3 years now, and every month we host a different topic, different conversation, just about a series of health-related topics. So just a bit about me, because something I always like to preface and something I'm always considering is that healthcare in and of itself has created a lot of harm. And I myself, being a Western practicing doctor, can sometimes represent, what the harms that we experience within medicine. And so I always am thinking, I like to share as much information with you as possible so that we can start to build that trust and that rapport. And so these are some pictures of me. So the left-hand corner is Pride Doc. So that's actually a picture of quite a few of the doctors that are located around the world, Native doctors located around the world, from Aotearoa, New Zealand, Australia, Hawaii, Canada, and the United States. And so this is a really powerful picture to me because I do work with national organizations and Indigenous physicians, medical students, residents, and learners, trying to make it so that we can improve what medicine is like and the harms that it perpetuates. I myself am not a traditional medicine practitioner, but I do try to learn and have been trying to learn. And so a lot of my family members hold a lot of traditional plant knowledge as well. This is a picture that I'm really proud of, receiving my bundle after 4 years of being on the land and working to learn more about traditional medicines, something that I'm still very new at and wanting to know. And I think really until I'm fluent in the language, I don't feel the most comfortable trying to make suggestions to folks, but just knowing that it's available for different health ailments. And then in the left hand side of the photo, you can see my sister and my kuka mama Shomis, and we're just building our family sweat lodge that's usually done twice a year. So I'm really grateful to just have grown up with culture and beautiful people in my life, grandparents that have taught me all that I know. So today we'll focus on key diabetes concepts. So that means understanding physically what happens to our body during diabetes, and discussing how culture treats this. I find that it can sometimes be difficult to understand why someone is giving you a suggestion, take this medication, do this thing, and you don't really know the reasons why. So my hope is actually to talk about early warning signs, to talk about what is actually physically happening to your body in diabetes, and then to talk about essentially treatment and how culture is actually a big part of treating diabetes. So how I think of this, so Migize, eagle eye vision. So I think of, when eagles and Migize, when they're flying high and they can sort of see things from a distance, when you say you have an eagle's eye view of something. And that means to look ahead, to anticipate what's coming ahead, and to be on the lookout for it. So early warning signs, and I think this is applicable to diabetes care because things to actually think about, to have that eagle eye view, to know that when you experience, or someone you yourself or someone experiences these things, that that this is a warning, maybe potentially an early warning sign, and you need to consider seeing someone, getting some help, getting checked out. So some of the early warning signs of diabetes include lack of energy and being really, really, really tired. Unusual and extreme thirst, like no amount of water is going to help you stay hydrated. Frequent peeing, blurred vision, or unusual weight loss or unintentional weight loss, right? All of a sudden you've dropped 10 pounds. You're like, well, I haven't really worked for that. I'm not sure where that's coming from, right? That can be an early warning sign. Getting infections often, right? Because your body is having a hard time recovering. Cuts and bruises that heal slowly, and numbness in your hands or feet. So these are, one of them does not say, oh, that means you have diabetes, but it's something, have that higher level perspective, that eagle's eye view of there is potential. Get these things checked out. Don't sit and wait on them. And then something that I also mention it can sometimes be an embarrassing topic for people, but sometimes you don't realize is that one of the early warning signs for diabetes with people who, with men, is actually trouble maintaining an erection. So having difficulty with that, and that's because the nerves are affected. So something that's often, taboo, not talked about, but actually diabetes or pre-diabetes, like that can actually be an early sign. So just to think about that. So oftentimes a question that I get asked is, someone said I have pre-diabetes. What does that mean? Because when you hear the word pre-diabetes, you're like, oh no, that means I'm about to get diabetes, or what? Like it's the before, but do I have it? When do I have it? And just to clarify, because you might have gotten blood work and someone said that to you, or you've heard someone say that, oh, the doctor, said, the nurse practitioner said I have pre-diabetes. And so how I think of things is that there's like normal pre-diabetes, and then actually being diabetes. And the way to assess that is actually through blood work. So there's something called a hemoglobin A1C. That's not the finger prick, on your finger where it tells you the sugar number. This is one that actually is drawn, from your veins, and it tells you a 3-month average of what your sugars have been over the last 3 months. So, which is kind of nice, right? Because if, the day before, I don't know, you had some McDonald's and now you're getting it tested, right? You're like, oh, my sugar, it's high because of what I ate yesterday. But this kind of takes into account 50% of the percentage that it spits out is, what's been in the last month, and the majority of it are the other 2 days. But essentially, getting that checked, and because that really tells you, like, are your sugars normal? Are you moving towards diabetes, and or do you have diabetes? I should also correct myself and say that there actually are hemoglobin A1C pinprick tests, so ones where you can just have, but like special clinics have it. Not everywhere has it. It's not very common. It's very expensive. So for the most part, it is blood that's drawn, but that is available, and you can ask that of your provider to say, hey, like I want to get this checked out. So 6.5, when you have a hemoglobin A1C of 6.5%, that is a diagnosis of diabetes. Anything from 6 to 6.4, right? That means like coming close to, but not quite, like you don't fit the true diagnostic criteria. And then normal, which is anything less than 6, according to Diabetes Canada guidelines. So how I think of it, when someone tells you, hey, like, you potentially are gonna have, like, these are high numbers. I think of it as a wake-up call, because it's a sign that your sugars are high, but it's still reversible, right? Like there's still something that can be done about it, still potentially reversible. Of the people that are told, hey, you're pre-diabetic, not officially there, but kind of getting close, we want you to make some changes, 1 out of 4 of them will develop, full-blown diabetes. So 25% of people who are told that. So it's not really a benign thing to be told that, and it is, and it's intended to be like, hey, draw your attention, something can still be done. It's not when you have diabetes nothing can be done, but once you've sort of reached that, that set point, you've reached that blood level, it's hard there, there's no cure for diabetes, right? So you can't go back. So we want to be on top of these things. Physically, what's happening in your body when someone's pre-diabetic is you have a sluggish pancreas. And so pancreas, essentially, your pancreas in your body has to respond to all the ups and downs, right, of your sugar. I eat a bag of chips and my pancreas is like, okay, we got to break this stuff down. And so, your pancreas is not fully damaged, but it's starting to get really tired because it's tired of these quick up and downs of sugars. And then it's not as quick to break it down, right? So this is like there's still stuff to think about. And physically, what's happening is that your pancreas is slower to respond. You're developing insulin resistance. Oh, I'm going to pull up the slide 1 second. No problem. So signs of insulin resistance in our young people. This is true of really anyone, but something I consider, because I'll sometimes hear this. You're like, oh, like your kid's neck is really dirty, or your armpits are really dirty, and you're like, it's actually not. So this is a medical sign that people are developing insulin resistance. It's called acanthos nigricans. But essentially, it's the dark velvety darkening that happens at folds. So whether it's your neck, your arm, your armpits, in between your legs, right? When you start to see that, that doesn't mean diabetes, but that is a sign of insulin resistance. It's your body trying to speak to you in terms of what's going on. Why I say to look for in our young people, because then this would prompt us as a community to like really encourage that kid to play outside more, especially like if they're not having as much outside time, and you notice that, hey, like try and go play outside more, try and reduce your screen time, because that's a really big thing that is happening with our young people is being glued to a screen, not staying very active, and then sort of just being stagnant, right? Because staying active helps keep us well. Something else I always try and recommend, always very difficult, of course, because children love juice, but really to try and decrease or stop giving juice as a main source of beverage. So just like encouraging water, and if they're hungry for a snack, offering something that's not a quick carb, but more something like a fruit or a vegetable. So when you see this, your grandkids, your kids, people in your family, really just try and promote active living. Don't ever promote in young people trying to lose weight, because weight isn't a sign of health, but activity is. So, really just try and be active with your family, because that will make a huge difference. So if people are moving towards insulin resistance, what can you actually do about it? Because I'm telling you the warning signs, these are the wake-up calls. And so insulin resistance comes from body fat. So if you try to decrease your body fat by exercising, you will make your cells less resistant to insulin. If you build more muscle, that means, if like, for example, I myself in the last year have gained 5 pounds of muscle, which is actually really hard to do and really difficult. But that means that me just sitting here, because I have that, my weight has gone up, but that extra 5 pounds being muscle means that when I'm just sitting doing nothing, when I'm sitting giving you this presentation, I'm burning more calories simply just by existing, right? So building muscle and not worrying about what it's doing to the weigh scale, but actually just like that's really important. And then low carbohydrates, low sugar diet with a lot of fiber, which usually means vegetables and fruits. So those are so either you're exercising to actually physically reduce body fat, you're building muscle, which then helps you burn more and use insulin more efficiently, or you're physically changing the way you eat. Those are truly the only ways to permanently reverse insulin resistance. Outside of that, there are ways to support your insulin from getting worse, and this is what this slide is about. So that includes things like traditional medicine. So in a previous talk that myself and Audrey did, we talked about medicines that often people use to regulate their sugars, and blueberry leaf tea and chaga, which is a bark, are often used and touted as medicines that actually really help with your sugar. So I have a picture of blueberries. Eating blueberries is also has a particular type of ingredient that's good, but just the leaves that are outside of the blueberries, when you take those and then you boil them, that can be really stabilizing for your sugar. Diabetes medications that can come from a healthcare provider such as myself. So examples or things you might hear from a doctor's office might be like metformin, Ozempic, Glyburide, Janumet. So those are just medications, right, where you're treating someone's diabetes by helping their sugars stay at a certain level, or helping get rid of their sugars in a certain way, right? So, and if you have high blood pressure, really trying to aim for less than 130/80. This is only true. This is true for most people who have diabetes. That's the goal. We do want control of people's blood pressure. But if you're an elder that has a lot of falls, then you don't really want to, it's more concerning for you to have a lower blood pressure than a higher one. So I give the caveat of try and maintain keep a good level of your blood pressure, and people can try and focus on these targets. This is what you're aiming for, but in reality, our communities, we do need to be cognizant of the fact that if we're trying to really have tight control for elders, they're at risk of falling. but actually just monitoring yourself, checking in with your body, check your feet every day, get blood work done every year, go to an optometrist once a year and get your eyes looked at, quit smoking, quit drinking, right? So those are all things that are possible, that are ways. These are the things where I was telling you about, where someone will give you the suggestion of like, hey, do these things, but not explain why. And so that's what this next part is going to be talking about. Just for your reference, because some people are numbers people, when you get your sugar tested, like what's considered normal. So usually when you fasted or, you haven't eaten for a while, anywhere from 4 to 7. So this is where you do, the finger prick, or maybe you have that continuous glucose monitoring where you have your app and you press it to your phone, and it gives you the sugar. But anywhere from 4 to 7 is okay. After 2 hours after eating, your goal is anywhere from 5 to 10 could be considered normal. If your sugar is already quite high to begin with, then 5 to 8. Right, so there's a huge range of what's considered normal. What I care about is not being more than 10 after 2 hours of eating, right? Because it's like, whoa, you should have had time to metabolize that by now. Why your sugar's still high? And that's a sign of the insulin resistance. And then being less than 4, right? When people are like, my sugar was 3. I was like, what? Because that's not good. Like, you do actually need sugar in order for your brain to function. So that's when people start to feel really shaky. So if you have sugars that are less than 4, that's a sign of like your sugars going up and down, and people can actually go into comas from their sugars being really low. So it's something to take seriously. Most people who have diabetes kind of know when they're close to low sugar, because they'll start to feel it. But just keeping track of the values, writing these down, knowing, so you can actually be informed. That's that slide there. Okay. So what is the normal pathophysiology? What's the normal process that happens in your body? Okay. So you're eating food, whether that's breakfast, lunch, or dinner. So then your pancreas goes, oh, great. This is some food. There's some energy, sugar. This is perfect. I want to use you, vegetables and broccoli or whatever you've eaten. I want to use you. And in order to access the sugar, I have to release insulin. So because insulin is kind of like the thing that unlocks sugar. If we didn't have insulin, literally sugar would just be floating around. And so you've eaten, your pancreas goes, great, thank you so much for the sugar. I'm gonna release it into the body so that we can carry on with our activity. Keep walking. Like I have the energy. Like keep walking, keep moving. So that's that paragraph. That's that slide there. Okay, so what happens then when we have like extra sugar, right? Not just like a regular meal. Well, then what happens when you're having extra is your pancreas has to increase insulin production. So because it's like we need to sort out the sugar. It can't just be sitting here. We need it because we're going for a walk. We need it because we're going to go traditional medicine picking. We need it so that we can get through this presentation. So we need this sugar. Where is it coming from? I need more of it. And thank you so much for eating this bag of chips, your pancreas says, because great, now we have some sugar to use. And so I want to use it up. And so what happens is your body is like, okay, well, where else can we get this? If we're not eating it, where else is sugar or energy stored? And so that's where the extra carbs come from, are in your liver. So anything that's not used, like say you have extra because you ate that bag of chips, the rest of where that sugar is going to go is to your liver, so that it can store it for times where, like you're really hungry, or you're fasting, or whatever it is, right? It kind of saves it. It puts it away for you just in case you need it. The issue though is that when your liver is like, actually, I'm pretty much at max. You've really given me a lot of sugar and fat from all of these extra things. We don't actually need it. So then that extra sugar and fat has to be stored somewhere, right? Because your liver's like, well, I don't know. There's nothing that I can do with this. I'm already full. And so what happens is that's when it gets stored on your body. So places like this. So whether that's, your belly, your arms, your chin, whether it's, fatty tissue that gets deposited inside of you, around your organs, And then essentially it's like, okay, well, we're at our max. We've deposited everywhere we could. We gave you a little chunky belly and a double chin. I don't really know where else to deposit that. Well, then your body goes, okay, well, we have to break this down now into triglycerides and low density lipoprotein. And triglycerides and LDL, those are like the bad types of cholesterol. Sometimes when you get blood work, people are like, there's good cholesterol and then there's bad cholesterol. And those are the bad cholesterols. And so when your body's like, there's nothing, like I have to get rid of this, because that's the way it'll do it, by breaking down into these byproducts that are actually quite dangerous to you, right, and clog up your arteries. So what happens then? So that's the process of like when we have extra stuff and how it gets stored. What about the process when you're running really low? Well, first of all, your brain's not happy about that. Like that's why when people have low blood sugar, they feel like their brains are shutting off, and that's because they are. If you don't have sugar, right, then you don't have the process to deliver oxygen to your brain. So that's why it can be pretty dangerous. But your pancreas goes, okay, you're running low on sugar. I'm not gonna release insulin. I'm actually gonna release this other hormone called glucagon, which is that little blue guy sort of, cutting, because remember we had all that stored sugar. So your pancreas, because it's like a conductor, where it's just, like when I think of like even surgeons that are conductors of lodges, right? Where it's like, your sugar's too high, let's do this. Your sugar's too low, let's do this. And so this is your body's way of dealing with when your sugars are too low. It literally breaks down what you have. And then your liver, taps in. It's like, remember that time you told me to store that extra sugar from that bag of ketchup chips? Well, here you go. I got you. And then it releases, and then our blood sugar comes up. Right? So then what's happening in type 2? If that's the normal process, what is going wrong, or what's happening to make type 2 diabetes? Well, your pancreas is getting really tired, right? How I mentioned before, there's these huge spikes in high and low sugars, especially if you're someone that, doesn't eat consistently throughout the day. And when you do, it's something like a fast, like, I don't know, coffee, cup of tea, bag of chips, like chocolate bar, because we need quick, because your body's like, your brain's like, why is there no sugar? So then that's why you crave those types of things. That's why people crave really quick sugars like that, is because their pancreas is getting so tired of these quick up and downs. And so what happens then, you're tired, your pancreas, really tired, and then it notices that your sugar isn't getting used up. So that bag of chips that you had, well, now it's like your tissue isn't even taking it up. And so if your body's not taking it up, then your pancreas goes, well, do you want some more insulin? Do you want some more insulin? We're like, no, that's not helping us. That's not the issue. Okay, but do you want some more, right? Like it's trying to like give you, it's like trying to be helpful, right? Because it's like, well, I see this extra sugar floating around from this ketchup chips and you're not using it, body. So maybe you need more insulin. Maybe that's the problem, right? Remember, because that was the key to unlocking all of the sugars. But your cells can't use it, because they're developing insulin resistance. That's a natural progression of type diabetes and all that stuff I was talking about at the beginning, insulin resistance. Your body isn't even using the sugar, even when it does have it. So it's saying, no, right? And then so what happens? Well, then you have sugar floating around. It's not being used by your muscle to finish this presentation. It's not being used by your lungs in order to take deep breaths. It's not being used by your brain in order to think thoughts. And it just sits there, right? Floating around in your bloodstream because it can't be used. Your pancreas tried, it released all of those green things, right? It released all of the insulin. It was like, come on, use up the sugar. But it's tired, it's resistant. And so that's why people with diabetes, you're like, why would you be tired? Your sugars are so high. You prick your finger and it says 24 for a sugar. Like, you'd think this person was like high off the rocker just with energy. The issue is that sugar is high, floating around in their body, but their body isn't using any of it. So actually they're extremely, extremely tired. And with that sugar floating around, not being used by anything, it's also sharp. So now it's making all these little tears in your blood vessel, right? So that's what we say when, how does diabetes affect your heart? This is how it affects your heart, because it's not being utilized by the things that actually need it. So it's essentially as if your body has no sugar, right? Because to your tissues, like to your lungs trying to breathe. They're like, I can't believe this person. They're not giving me any sugar. But in reality, you had sugar. You had that bag of chips, right? But it's not picking it up anymore. So this then brings us to the crux of, okay, so when people talk about type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes, what is happening? So I've been talking mostly about type 2 diabetes. Type 1 is usually, the issue is that your body can't make insulin because your own immune cells have destroyed the pancreas. This tiny, cute little, like, yellow looking pancreas thing essentially is not even releasing all of these green things. It can't release anything at all, right? So when you have type 1, that's why people have to be on insulin. There's no choice because it's not trying to give you these extra little green things, right? It's like, no, it's your body has destroyed its cells, and so now it can't do that. So type 1, that's what's happening. Your pancreas, just so you know, in case you don't, is like the middle part of your stomach. So if you felt like where your chest bone was, then you went like a few finger widths below, you would sort of start to feel that that's where your pancreas was located. So sometimes people even feel pain there, right? So if this is my sternum here and I feel down, that's where my pancreas would be. So it's in you and it does so many different things. It functions and does so many different things, but it gets really tired when we're expecting it to respond to our really chaotic lifestyles. I'm thinking even of people, where they work, haven't eaten all day, and now they get home, they eat, and then they crash. Do you know why it's crashing? Because your pancreas is like, where was my sugar all day? You were hyper-focused on an activity. Like, I needed this sugar a long time ago. And so now it's trying to respond to this huge dump of sugar you're giving it. And then it gets tired. And that's why people start to gain weight. And then they become insulin resistant. And then they develop diabetes. So type 1 is like your body isn't producing those little green things that I'm showing you. It's not giving up any insulin. Whereas type 2 diabetes, technically, your body's trying to make insulin. It's producing those little green things. It's just not using it properly, or it's becoming resistant. So then how does this affect treatment? Well, like I say, people with type 1 diabetes will always need insulin and there was no preventing anything, right? It was autoimmune, meaning your body thought something was dangerous even though it wasn't, and then it started to destroy it. How I think of autoimmune conditions is like your body thought it was being helpful by protecting you, but then it just started destroying a bunch of things it didn't need to because there was no problem with it, but it thought there was. Whereas type 2 diabetes, you may not need insulin, right? There's lots of people who are living with diabetes and they don't need to take insulin, or you can at least prevent or delay this if you try and control the risk factors. People usually at a young age develop type 1 diabetes, so they're usually a child or young adult. But for type 2 diabetes, you can be any age. It's most likely you'll develop this as an adult. But we are seeing now younger children in our Indigenous children in our communities developing diabetes early on, and it's not because of type 1 diabetes, meaning it's not because their pancreas is completely trying to destroy itself. It's actually because of type 2 diabetes. So people are getting younger and younger when these things are happening. So your low blood sugars, right, are going to occur often when you have type 1 diabetes, whereas type 2, it doesn't occur as often, usually unless you're on like a medication, right? That's the thing that's gonna usually, or you're not eating. You're taking a medication that's lowering your blood sugar and you've taken too much of it, or you're not eating, which also lowers your blood sugar. Type 1 diabetes, you kind of know right away, right? Like you would notice instantly, and that's why people get diagnosed at such a young age if your body wasn't using up any sugar, because kids literally wouldn't develop, right? They would not play. They would not be able to think properly. So that's why you catch on to it usually pretty early, because kids start to have really wicked symptoms. Whereas in type 2, it occurs over time. You don't even realize until you're like, get the blood work and you're like, wait a second, what just happened here? And that's what that's from. So that's how sugars are affected. This is what the process that's happening in diabetes. Your body is trying to do the best it can. But what about that extra sugar? Because like I say, if you're not taking a medication that's helping you pee out that sugar, break down that sugar, store that sugar, or do something with it, it just sits there. And so this is what we say when we say macrovascular complications. Macro just means big, vascular means blood vessels. So diabetes affects your big blood vessels. because the sugar is jagged, it makes these little micro tears, right? So, and you think of like when you get a paper cut and you're like, oh man, it's like you can't help but not notice a paper cut. Like it's absolutely, you cannot ignore it. You're just like, it just, because it irks at you, right? You feel it. And that's what's happening essentially on the inside in your blood vessels. It's like these paper cuts all over the place. And so your body, it can't not ignore it. Same with when you have a paper cut. So then it starts sending a bunch of stuff. It's like, oh, I don't know why you're tearing, but let me send a bunch of stuff. It sends enzymes, it sends platelets. It's sending a bunch of stuff being like, go repair whatever this little tear is from. But then what starts to happen is that other things start being attracted to that area, right? Because it's your body is like drawing attention to it. And all of these things are starting to build there, right? All of these enzymes, these platelets. And then, so when we think of, from that extra bag of chips, that extra carbs where we couldn't do anything with it because everything was, all the hotel rooms were taken up. Well, those extra carbs are floating around and it gets stuck to that. It gets stuck to where that micro tear is. So then this is how your arteries start to become clogged, right? This is how people develop plaque, is because those micro tears, and your body sending a bunch of stuff, reinforcements, and then other things that were just sitting there like, oh, I want to join the party, right? The carbs want to join the party. So they go to that spot too, become plaque. Therefore, your arteries start to get clogged, and that's why people get heart attacks, because their arteries, when we say clogged, it means the inside of the lining of the blood vessel is just full of plaque, right? And so and then blood flow can't get through there. And then so if you're trying to run or you mow the lawn and now your blood vessel is narrower, well then your heart is going to start to feel chest pain, right? It's going to be painful, because literally your body's trying to push oxygen and blood to your heart because you're exerting yourself, because you're mowing the lawn, for example. But because those carbs were floating around, they're now becoming plaque. There's a smaller hole that it has to try and move through, and that's dangerous. And then something like red blood cells, right? We all have those. Your body is like, oh, I also want to join this party. And so then that has the potential to become a clot. So when people say that there's a risk of like heart attack and stroke with diabetes, this is what they're talking about, because those red blood cells walking by, they're like, oh, what's happening here? Maybe I can help. They just start aggregating and going on top of each other, and then it becomes a clot. And then that clot, has the potential to lodge itself anywhere in your body, in your brain, having a stroke, in your heart, having a heart attack, right? In your leg, having a DVT, having a big clot in your leg. So something as benign as like extra sugar in your body, you don't think it could cause these things, but it can, especially if you're being exposed to really high sugars for extended periods of time. It's going to affect those things. And we talked about that. The triglycerides and low density lipoprotein, those being the things that really are now making it even worse for our big blood vessels, right? The things floating around, because they're like, that's what triglycerides are, or is cholesterol that's floating around in your blood. And again, it's like, what's going on here? It joins, they build on top of each other, and bam, then you have a heart attack. And that's why sometimes things can happen really quickly too. Like all of a sudden, you're just like, sometimes people find out that they have diabetes because they had a heart attack or stroke. And you're like, why? What's happening? And it's because it's slowly progressing, right? We didn't think of most people, before they've had diabetes, they've developed warning signs. Like that eagle eye vision stuff that they were talking about, they were actually experiencing some of those things, but they didn't get checked soon enough. So then they weren't prompted to make changes soon enough. And then, then it turned into full blown. So this is the things that I was talking about. So heart attack, stroke, and peripheral arterial disease. That's just a word for the big blood vessels that run through your leg. So like how sometimes when people have diabetes, their leg kind of like cramps or it gets really, really painful when they walk. Think of it, when you're trying to exert yourself, there's a bunch of plaque there because of the sugar being jagged, and it's trying to move. Well, then it's like it's trying to move back up is going to be painful, right? Or why people's like with diabetes have purple or red legs. It's because the arteries aren't doing well, or even they get cold, like really, really cold. And that's because your body's having a hard time pushing it back, because those blood vessels you can see in that right-hand corner, they're affected and they're not happy. So clogged arteries in your legs is also a really big deal because that can lead to wounds that don't heal, which can then lead to tissue breaking down, and then people having, these wounds that sit there for a long period of time, and then all of a sudden they have an amputation, right? So Northern Ontario has some of the highest rates of amputation, and majority of them come from diabetic foot complications. So something to really consider is that if the blood vessel is being affected, not only is it having a heart, but like the blood that needs to go to try and heal that wound, it can't even get there. Look on the right hand side, that green arrow. It can't even if your body was trying to heal that, it can't even get there. It's clogged, it's all inflamed, right? So that's why things take a long time to heal. That's why wounds take a long time. That's why we need to stay on top of wound care. Because if we don't, it's just going to keep building, and then that's what happens, right? People can get amputations. So if there's repeated exposure to things, right? Because if your arteries are clogged, your nerve sensation isn't going to be good either, right? Because the jagged sugar concept that I'm using also applies to nerves, right? That's why people get numbness and tingling. But if you have repeated exposure to a trauma, say for example, you have a rock in your shoe, there's a sharp edge of your chair that's rubbing against your leg, right? Your blood vessels are damaged on the inside from the sharp edges of the sugar, which has led to poor blood supply. And damage also means that the blood has a hard time going up from your leg to your heart where it would be reoxygenated. Because that's the whole point, right? That's why we have a heart, is to pump things. So we need blood to go down to our feet and to come all the way up to our brain, and then to do that process over and over. Why it does that is so that it can reoxygenate your blood. But if it can't even get up to your heart because the bottom of your legs are so swollen all the time, then it's not going to get reoxygenated. And so then that's wounds progress. So other areas that are affected, so I talked about the big ones, macro, right? Those are like the really, really big arteries. These are the small ones. So the small blood vessels. And so those are things like in your eye, in your kidneys, your nerves, your feet, your hands, right? So those are things where that sugar, because that's the first thing it'll start to attack. It's pretty hard to make damage to a big blood vessel. It's quite easy to make damages to a small vessel. So that's why people get the blurred vision, right, as a symptom of diabetes, because that sugar is damaging the nerve and the blood vessels. So people might sometimes, their diabetes gets so bad that they then need dialysis because their kidney is disrupted. So diabetes is truly like a whole body process. And it affects so many different organs, pretty well from top to bottom, almost every single organ. So that's why recognizing what the signs are, knowing what they are, getting things checked out, and then acting on them as quickly as possible so that we can prevent complications like this. Like some people might be like, well, I already have it. What's the point? No, it could get worse. That's actually exactly the natural progression of diabetes, is that it will get worse. What we're trying to do is prevent it so that it doesn't, right? That's what we're trying to stave off. It's 3:49. The next thing I have, I believe, after talking about this, is a break with some questions. So I'll finish this off just talking about what happens when your brain experiences stress. So your brain is hardwired to escape life-threatening situations. In ancestral times, right, what would this have been? I don't know, a saber-toothed lion. It would have been like animals trying to eat you, right? Your brain is solely focused on keeping you alive from threats and keeping you from starving, right? Predators and physical threats. So in either situation, your brain is releasing energy. It's releasing glucose into your bloodstream because it's like, hey man, you really need to address this. We're either going to need to flee, or we're going to need to fight, or we're going to need to do something. So, your pancreas is talking with your brain, hey, we need sugar, quick, right? And so, but the issue and the ways that we have evolved is that our brain interprets stress and assumes that we're about to experience famine. Like, for example, if Jade or myself were stressed before coming onto this call, that's not a lion trying to kill us. But our body was like, oh, I sense that you're feeling some stress. So it just assumes we're about to experience famine. Even though we're not. Like, we literally just ate snacks, right? So we're not about to experience famine. But your body says, but maybe that's what's going to happen. So then it stores all of the sugar and stores it as fat in preparation from the looming famine that is, with like the way food is looking, that is like actually a feasible situation, especially if you're in a low income household, right? Not having access to food. But that's why it's just this self-perpetuating cycle, because your body is having a hard time using the sugar. It's constantly under stress. Your brain is always talking with your pancreas saying, hey, we really need sugar because we're in a fight or flight situation. And your body is like, well, we'll give you as much as we can, but also we're going to hold on to this, and it holds on to it super hard because it's worried that we're going to experience famine, right? And just this last point here to illustrate this. So my brain's like, oh, that's the tiger. Maybe there's another danger. Maybe it's, I don't know, walking past some chemical waste. Maybe it's having a really tight deadline that's coming up and your boss is putting pressure on you. All of three of these things send the same exact signal to your brain, the same intensity, the same strength, even though we know one out of three of those things is actually truly like could kill you, right? But your brain isn't making that distinction. Its only job is to tell you, are you stressed or are you not? And so it's going to interpret stress all the same. It's going to send the exact same signal, which is danger. And so then that's even more sugar, right? The think of, if you're always stressed, that means you're having a high peak in sugar, a low peak in sugar, up and down, and your pancreas is like, is this person ever gonna like stop being in danger? But then when we think about it, are Native people ever stopping being out of danger? So since being colonized, since the year 1604, Indigenous people have been put under immense stress and pain and violence for over 400 years. And so think of like just our everyday stress and then the stress of colonization. And so this is what I mean about how diabetes is so prevalent in our communities, and this is why, is because of the constant stress that we're put under. Cortisol is released. Your body has to go, well, let's respond to this danger. I'm about to go to the emergency department. I might not be taken seriously. Let's respond to this danger. Boom, bunch of sugar in your body. And your body's like, well, wait, we don't need this. Like, this is harmful, but like we may not die. So we probably didn't need all of this sugar. But it released it anyways because it thought it was going to be in trouble. So your body, it has all of these survival mechanisms to keep you alive and well. But what's happening is that when people are experiencing this danger, they're constantly under stress. Like, that's why people develop diabetes, truly. That is like, there's no one cause. People say it's a bunch of things. But in our Indigenous communities, majority of people who have type 2 diabetes have lived really, really hard lives. They have experienced a lot of trauma and they continue to deal with these impacts, right? If I'm constantly under threat because of how I, as an Indigenous person, am treated within society, literally my pancreas and my brain are always on guard. And that fatigues my pancreas even sooner, right? Like then we're in a worse situation now because our pancreases were already tired from regular day deadlines, and now this. And so that's just something to consider by which is the next thing that we're going to talk about, which is then how could you treat diabetes to get to the root cause, to get to these issues, because all of these things are melding into one picture, right? The danger of what's happening in the world and the constant stress. So then what can we do to actually change that? So that's what this next part of the talk is going to talk about. I'll go back to this. We'll take a 10-minute, what time is it? It is 3:54. So we'll come back at 4:05. And we'll answer any questions that get asked if they appear in the chat. So feel free to send those our way. When we come back from the break, that's when we're going to answer them. Okay, so we'll see you again at 4:05. Mm-hmm.
Are alligators diabetic?
Because they're so...
Okay, so this came up when I was in Louisiana. We were on the airboat and they were giving us marshmallows to toss at the gators because they see white more than because of white of a deer belly or like it's just something they see more of. And then some guy from Washington was like, should we be giving them marshmallows? Are they diabetic?
I don't know.
We were just like,
That's so funny.
That is.
Like, maybe.
I'm gonna go with no because they probably don't have the brain function to be stressed like that.
well,
Which probably puts them on the alert.
and that's just it, because they're an apex predator, right?
The fact that guy even like wanted to like care about the alligators in that sense, like we should look at diabetes first.
Yeah.
Like, what a well-rounded man.
America.
We're not muted.
We're not?
Nope.